Hey, heathens. The concept of spiritual death has been brought up by many, many Christians to explain why in Genesis, God tells Adam that he will die if he eats from the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. But when Adam eats the fruit, he doesn't die, just as the serpent said he wouldn't. Now, this seems like God lied, but they say that no, he did die, and so it was a spiritual death. But nowhere in the book of Genesis does it say that. They go to several different verses in the Bible to try and support this. Recently, I was having a conversation with someone who posed this exact thing in response to my video in my Genesis series. His video doesn't matter. There are plenty of other people that make this exact same argument, so I'm just going to discuss that, but I am going to use some of the verses that he brought up because I urged him to give me a verse that supports this. There are several that they tend to rely on, so let's take a look at a few of them. Now, he cites Colossians chapter 2. Several problems with that alone. First of all, he didn't give me a verse, but I'm assuming he means verse 13. And when you're dead in your transgressions and the uncircumcision of your flesh, he made you alive together with him, having forgiven us of our transgressions. That doesn't say spiritual death. It doesn't. There are many, many others. He also cited James, which I assume he means, for just as the body without the spirit is dead. Okay. Seems a little analogous to me. Also faith without works is dead. Seems like they're talking about something completely different there. But I have a bigger problem with that. And there's a site that loves to advertise on YouTube here, and I will link you to this page, as they give a list of quotes from the Bible that is supposed to support this idea of spiritual death. The first is Matthew 8:22, Matthew 10:28, Matthew 22:32, Luke 15:32, Romans 8:10, then the Colossians, James, 1 Peter 4:6, Romans 5:20, and 1 Corinthians 15:31. Do you notice anything about all of those quotes that they have in common? That's right, they're all from the New Testament. None from the Old Testament, but we're talking about an event that happened in Genesis. Now, if you take what scholars believe that the Old Testament, as we know it today, was written somewhere around 1,000 years BCE, the New Testament comes after the beginning of the Common Era, throughout the first and second, the end of the first and the second, third centuries. Then you have a 1,000-year gap there just from when it was written down. If you believe the literal 6,000-year-old earth claims that some people do, that means the story of Genesis happened 4,000 years before the New Testament happened. So for 4,000 years, all of those quotes did not exist. I discredit every single one of them based on that premise alone. Imagine I write a paper and it's got an error in it. Okay, and the error is a complete is a flaw in my statements. I said 2 + 2 = 5. Okay, 2,000 years later, 1,000 years later, 2 years later, okay, 6 months later, after my error has been exposed by some people, someone else comes along because they support me so much and writes a new paper. It's not me. I didn't say it. Someone new comes along and they write a paper that says that what I meant was 2.5 plus 2.5, or I'm sorry, 2.4 plus 2.4 would give you 4.8, which you could round up to 5, and therefore 2 + 2 does equal 5. Is that what I meant, or did I make an error? You can't tell from the later writing. It's a new author, a new paper, and it has nothing to do with me. So anything from the New Testament you have to completely wipe out. Now, on this site, they cite from the Old Testament nothing. So I asked my counterpart here to name me anything he could give me from the Old Testament that would support the idea of spiritual death. This is the best that he can come up with. He mentions that in Genesis 2, God tells Adam that he will die if he eats the fruit, and in Genesis 3, he describes what happened after Adam ate the fruit. So there's two possibilities. Either God was a liar, or God is referring to something other than physical death. That is your assertion. To say that that proves your point is circular logic. Okay, so we have to discredit both of those immediately. The next two that he gives is Psalms 51, again, not giving the verse, just Psalms 51, where it tells us that a broken spirit is more important than a physical sacrifice. But that says nothing about a spiritual death of Adam. It says nothing about spiritual death, period. Then you have Isaiah 53, which describes sickness and pain as being the spiritual result of sin. Okay, sickness and pain is still not death, nor is it talking about Adam. So, sorry, you have nothing that supports this idea that it is a spiritual death, and that's what God was talking about. So now let's go to what the Bible actually says and determine if it makes more sense that it's a spiritual death or that, in fact, God's a liar. Our friend likes the King James Version. I do too. It has unicorns. Verse 17, but of the tree of knowledge of good and evil thou shalt not eat of it, for in the day that thou eatest thereof thou shalt surely die. Okay? In the day. All right. Now there are those who say that in the day means there's 1,000 years to a day for God, and since Adam did not live to be over 1,000 years, that's what he meant. That has more weight than your idea of spiritual death. I find that to be, BS as well, but it has better weight than what you're trying to suggest. Others will say that what that means is that he wasn't going to die, but since he did that, then now he will surely die at some point in time. Okay? That has more weight than what you're trying to suggest with your spiritual death. Then we come down to chapter 3, and the woman, Eve, is talking to the serpent, and she explains to him that she can't eat from there. And in the verse 4, the serpent said unto the woman, Ye shall not surely die. And convinces her to eat the fruit, and of course she doesn't die. So what this seems to be doing is spelling out the story of this person who tells someone, don't eat this or you'll die, and this other serpent that comes along who says, yeah, that's not true. Actually, what will happen is that when you eat it, your eyes will be opened, and you'll be gods like he is. And sure enough, if you read the text, that's what happens. Their eyes are open and they understand that they're naked. And if they eat from the tree of life, they'll become gods like us, as it is quoted in the Bible. So apparently what the serpent was saying was correct. Now, it certainly seems odd for that to be in the Bible, that God lied to them to try and trick them into not eating from the fruit, eating from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And so he told them that they would die, when in fact they didn't and weren't going to. So why would it be in there? For that, you have to go to ancient Egypt. Egypt? That's right, you must go to ancient Egypt. When you look at the two stories, it all becomes perfectly clear. When you look at scholars and you're looking at the Old Testament, I prefer to ask Jews, because it's their book, not yours. So you can rewrite a new book and change what it means into this spiritual death, but you got no scriptural basis to do so in the Old Testament. Sorry, but you don't. But don't take my word for it. Think for yourself.